The billionaire's son was failing every test. The janitor who mopped the floors at night was the only one who knew why. Preston Callahan had 8 weeks to pass his classes or lose his inheritance, $40 billion hanging on chemistry. Formulas he couldn't understand and calculus problems that made his head spin. His father had already called the lawyers. His teachers had already given up. And the other students at Exeter Academy were placing bets on which day he'd finally drop out. But Elijah Ford, the black janitor everyone ignored as he pushed his mop bucket through empty hallways, saw something in the spoiled rich kid that nobody else did. Potential, buried under 17 years of shortcuts and excuses. What Preston didn't know, what would take months to discover, was that the man teaching him math with mop buckets and physics with floor polish wasn't really a janitor at all, but the brilliant engineer his own father had destroyed years ago. And their collision was about to expose a web of stolen patents and buried dreams that would bring down an empire. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The rain hammered against the Gothic windows of Exeter Academy. Each drop a reminder that even nature couldn't wash away Preston Callahan's latest failure. The red ink on his chemistry exam seemed to glow in the dim afternoon light of the empty classroom. The number 32 circled 3 times by his teacher, as if once wasn't enough humiliation. Preston crumpled the paper and tossed it toward the trash can. It missed, naturally. Everything he touched lately seemed destined to fail. Preston Callahan to the headmaster's office. Preston Callahan, immediately. The intercom's crackle made him freeze. Recognized that tone, not the usual exasperated summons, but something sharper. Something that meant his father had arrived. Preston grabbed his designer backpack, its leather worth more than most people's monthly rent, and trudged through Exeter's mahogany-paneled halls. Portraits of distinguished alumni watched him pass, their painted eyes seeming to judge the 17-year-old disaster shuffling beneath them. He could already hear the whispers from other students peeking out of doorways. Trust fund dodos. In trouble again? Bet Daddy's here to write another check. How do you fail with unlimited tutors? The headmaster's office door stood open. Inside, Charles Callahan dominated the room, despite being shorter than the headmaster. Everything about Preston's father screamed power, the perfectly tailored suit that cost more than a car, the Patek Philippe watch that caught the light just right. The way he stood with his back to the door, as if the world would wait for him to turn around. 32%, Charles said, without looking at his son. In chemistry, at a school I donate 7 figures to annually. Dad, and 28 in calculus. 41 in literature, I continue. Charles finally turned, his gray eyes as cold as the steel in the skyscrapers he built. You're not just failing, Preston. You're setting records for failure. Headmaster Williams shifted uncomfortably behind his desk. Mr. Callahan, perhaps we could discuss this privately? No. Charles's voice cut through the suggestion. My son needs to understand consequences, real ones. He pulled out his phone, that year's latest model that wouldn't hit the market for another month. I'm calling my lawyer. You don't pass this semester, every single class you're out of the will. The trust fund, the properties, the company shares, everything. Preston felt his knees weaken. You can't be serious. Dead serious. You have 8 weeks. One more failure, and you'll learn what it's like to actually work for a living. Charles straightened his cuffs, a gesture Preston recognized as his father's way of ending conversations. Maybe mopping floors will teach you what my money couldn't. The door slammed behind Charles with the finality of a judge's gavel. Preston stood there, his mouth open, his world tilting. Headmaster Williams cleared his throat. Preston, I've arranged for additional tutoring. Whatever. Preston stumbled out, his mind racing. 8 weeks. How was he supposed to pass classes he'd been failing all year? That night, Preston couldn't focus on the party in the senior dorm. While his classmates passed around bottles of champagne, someone's older brother had smuggled in. Preston sat on the fire escape, vaping and staring at nothing. The nicotine did nothing for his nerves. Careful with that. Sets off the smoke alarms. Preston nearly dropped his vape pen. A man stood in the shadows of the hallway pushing a mop bucket. Preston had seen him around the night janitor who always seemed to be working when students were breaking rules. Black, maybe late 40s, with graying hair at the temples and hands that looked like they'd done real work. "You gonna report me?" Preston asked, not really caring about the answer. "Not my job." The janitor's name tag read Elijah Ford, continued mopping.
Up.
"My job's the floors." Preston laughed bitterly. "At least you have a job you can actually do." Elijah paused, leaning on his mop handle. "And you don't?" "My job is to not be a failure. Not going great." Preston took another drag. "My dad says I'll end up like—" He stopped, suddenly aware of what he'd been about to say. "Like me." Elijah's voice held no anger, just curiosity. "Mopping floors." "I didn't mean sure you did." Elijah resumed mopping, the steady swish, filling the silence. "Interesting thing about floors, though. They're the foundation. Everything else gets built on top, but without a solid floor, it all comes crashing down." Preston snorted. "That's supposed to be deep?" "No, just true." Elijah moved past him, leaving behind the sharp scent of industrial cleaner. "You should get to bed. You've got that history exam tomorrow. 3rd period. Preston frowned. "How do you know that? I clean the classrooms, see all the schedules." Elijah tapped his temple. "Amazing what you learn when people think you're invisible." 2 days later, Preston's world got worse. Mr. Harrison's BMW sat in the faculty lot with a giant scratch down the side. It's courtesy of Preston's keys and a moment of rage after receiving another failed exam. The security footage was damning. "Detention for a week," Headmaster Williams announced, "but not regular detention. You'll be working with our custodial staff. Every evening, 7 to 10. Preston wanted to argue, but his father's ultimatum echoed. In his head, 8 weeks. He couldn't afford more trouble that evening. He reported to the janitor's closet in the basement. Elijah was there, organizing supplies with the precision of a surgeon, arranging instruments. "You're the kid who keyed Harrison's car," Elijah said without looking up. "He failed me on purpose." "No, you failed on purpose." "Oh." "He just recorded it." Elijah handed Preston a mop. "You know how to use this?" "It's a mop, not rocket science." "Then show me." Preston grabbed it roughly, sloshing water everywhere as he dragged it across the floor. Elijah watched for 30 seconds before stopping him. "You're fighting it," Elijah said. "The mop, the floor, the water. Everything's your enemy. It's mopping. It's a system." Elijah took the mop, demonstrating smooth, efficient strokes. Here, angled there, rhythm throughout. Every job has a right way and a wrong way. You've been choosing the wrong way your whole life. You don't know anything about my life. I know you're Preston Callahan. I know your father owns half of Manhattan. I know you've had every advantage, every opportunity, and you've wasted them all. Elijah handed the mop back. I also know you're scared. First time in your life something real is at stake. Your Preston wanted to storm out, but something in Elijah's tone held him. Not judgment, not pity, just observation. They worked in silence. For an hour before Elijah spoke again. "You know why you're really failing? Because I'm stupid? Because you've never had to pay attention? Money bought you shortcuts. Tutors gave you answers. But nobody taught you how to see." Elijah pointed to a bulletin board. "Quick, how many flyers are on that board?" Preston glanced. "I don't know, 12? 23? "How many lockers in this hallway?" "How would I know that?" "Combination to locker 36 is the 19th of July 31. Kid writes it on his hand every morning because he keeps forgetting." Elijah continued mopping. "I'm invisible to you people, so I see everything. You're so visible, you've never had to see anything." On the 3rd night of detention, Preston arrived to find Elijah reading a thick textbook. Advanced Calculus, from what Preston could see of the cover. That's past what we're learning," Preston said. "Is it?" Elijah didn't look up. "Your class is on derivatives? Chapter 12 in the Morrison textbook, which your teacher supplements with problem sets from Kumar's advanced workbook?"
Oh.
"Could you possibly know that?" Elijah finally looked up. "Because I cleaned your classroom. I see what's on the board. I emptied the trash full of your failed attempts." He closed the book. "You think wisdom wears a tux?" "I don't think anything." "That's your first honest statement." Elijah stood, stretching his back. Tonight we're fixing the projector in room 203. That's not custodial work. Everything's custodial work when you're the custodian. Come on. Room 203's projector had been broken for weeks. Teachers had been complaining. Tech support had been called twice, but nothing had been fixed. Elijah pulled over a chair and examined the device. "Tell me what you see," he said to Preston. "A broken projector. Look closer." Preston reluctantly climbed on another chair. "There's dust in the vents, and that cable looks loose." "Good. What else?" "I don't know. The bulb housing is cracked. So what's the real problem?" Preston thought about it. Multiple problems? The dust is causing overheating. The loose cable means intermittent connection. And the cracked housing is letting more dust in. Elijah smiled, the first real smile Preston had seen from him. "Now you're seeing? Fix it? I don't know how." "Then learn." It took them an hour. Elijah guided but never touched the projector himself, making Preston work through each problem. When the projector finally hummed to life, displaying a perfect image on the wall, Preston felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine accomplishment. "You could have fixed that in 5 minutes, Preston said. "But then you wouldn't." "Have learned anything?" "Why do you care if I learn?" Elijah packed up his tools. "'Cause 40 years ago, someone cared if I learned. Changed my whole life." "Were you? Were you always a janitor?" "No one's always anything, kid. We're all just becoming something else." On the last night of detention, Preston found himself actually disappointed it was ending. He'd started noticing things: how Elijah organized supplies by frequency of use, not alphabetically. How he could predict which bathrooms would need extra attention based on the day's schedule. How he knew every student's name, even though none of them knew his. "Can I ask you something?" Preston said while refilling soap dispensers. "You've been asking me things all week. Do you read those advanced textbooks?" Elijah was quiet for a long moment. "You think education stops when school does?" Only if you let it." Elijah pulled out his worn notebook, pages filled with calculations and diagrams. "Every problem I see, I try to solve. Leaky pipe? That's fluid dynamics. Efficient cleaning route? That's optimization theory. Nobody certificates my learning anymore, but that doesn't mean I stop." Preston looked at the notebook more carefully. The mathematics were beyond anything he'd seen, even in advanced placement courses. This is ... This is really complex stuff." "Complex. Might as well understand it, but what's the point? You're still ... double quotes. Preston caught himself, still mopping floors. Elijah laughed. "Yeah, I am. But I'm the best damn floor mopper in this school. And more importantly, I understand why I'm mopping, how I'm mopping, what mopping teaches me about everything else." "What could mopping possibly teach you?" "Patience, consistency, the value of foundation work. That visible dirt isn't always the real problem. That the same stroke that cleans can also polish depending on pressure and intention." Elijah looked at Preston directly. "That sometimes the most important work happens when nobody's watching." Preston started showing up early. To school, not for classes, but to find Elijah. The janitor began his shift at 5 a.m. Preston discovered that the building was different in those pre-dawn hours, quieter, more honest somehow. "You're going to get me in trouble," Elijah said the third morning Preston appeared. "Aren't supposed to be here this early?" "I'll say I'm studying." Preston held up his calculus textbook as evidence, which isn't even a lie. "I actually am trying to study." It's trying being the key word. I read the same page 5 times. Nothing sticks. Elijah finished emptying a trash bin. "You're memorizing, not understanding. Big difference." "What's the difference? Come here." Elijah led him to his supply closet, which Preston now knew doubled as Elijah's unofficial office. The walls were covered with diagrams, schedules, and mathematical equations. Elijah pointed to a cleaning schedule grid. "Tell me why Thursday takes longer than Monday." Preston studied it. "More areas to clean? Same areas. Try again. Different type of cleaning? Getting warmer?" Preston thought about the school week. Thursday has more activities. Drama club, debate team, late sports practices. More people using spaces for longer. More accumulated dirt, more trash. More disorder. It's not just about cleaning the same spaces. It's about understanding how those spaces are used. Elijah nodded. Now you're thinking in systems. Your math problem isn't different. You're trying to memorize formulas instead of understanding why the formula exists. He pulled out a piece of paper and drew a simple curve. Derivative. What is it? Rate of change. But what does that mean? Elijah grabbed an apple from his lunch bag and rolled it across the table. Speed changes as this rolls. Starts fast. Slows down. The derivative tells you exactly how that change happens at every moment. I get that conceptually, but no buts. If you get it conceptually, you can get it mathematically. The math is just the language we use to describe what's already happening. Elijah wrote out an equation. This isn't abstract. This is that apple rolling. For the next hour before students arrived, Elijah taught Preston calculus using mops, buckets, and cleaning routes. Everything became tangible, real. When Preston finally looked at his textbook again, the formulas seemed less like foreign language and more like descriptions of things he could visualize. Why didn't my teachers explain it like this? Preston asked. Maybe they did. You weren't ready to listen. Elijah started preparing for his regular rounds. There's something you need to understand, Preston. I'm going to tell you the one secret that changed my life. Preston leaned in, expecting something profound about mathematics or studying. If you treat failure like a teacher, it'll give you more than success ever will. That's it. That's everything. Elijah picked up his mop bucket. Success makes you feel good. Failure makes you better. But only if you study it, understand it, learn from it. Most people run from failure. The smart ones dissect it. Over the next weeks, Preston found himself seeking out Elijah more frequently. Their conversations ranged from homework help to life philosophy, always during those early morning hours when the school belonged to them. You weren't always a janitor, Preston said one morning. It wasn't a question anymore. Elijah was quiet, focusing on scrubbing a particularly stubborn stain. No, what were you? Someone who thought he was smarter than everyone else. Turns out I was only half right. I was smart, but so were the people who knew how to play the game better. What game? The one your father's winning at? Elijah's voice held an edge Preston hadn't heard before. The one where innovation matters less than connections, where patents matter less than lawyers, where being right matters less than being powerful. Preston wanted to ask more, but Mr. Hargrove appeared in the hallway. The young math teacher always arrived early, his ambition as visible as his poorly fitting suits. Callahan. What are you doing here? Hargrove's eyes narrowed. And why are you talking to maintenance staff? I'm studying, Preston said, holding up his textbook. With the janitor? I was just asking him to unlock the library. Preston lied smoothly. Hargrove looked between them suspiciously. The library doesn't open for another hour, which is why I needed it unlocked. Elijah had already moved away, pushing his bucket down the hall, becoming invisible again. But Hargrove watched him go with an expression Preston didn't like. Next week, Preston took his first exam since starting his morning sessions with Elijah. When papers were returned, he stared at the result in disbelief. 71%. A C-. His first passing grade in months, he practically ran to find Elijah that afternoon. Finding him fixing a broken desk in an empty classroom, I passed. Preston waved the exam. I actually passed. Sound surprised, aren't you? Elijah tested the desk's stability. You're smart, Preston. You've just been lazy. There's a difference between can't and won't. My father won't believe this. I'll think I cheated, did you? Then who cares what he thinks? Elijah moved to another broken desk. Your father measures everything by results, but process matters more. You're learning how to learn. That's bigger than any grade. But Preston's improvement didn't go unnoticed. Hargrove requested to see his exam, going through it line by line, looking for evidence of cheating. Finding none only seemed to make him more suspicious. Nobody jumps from 30s to 70s overnight, Hargrove said during class, loud enough for everyone to hear. Mr. Callahan, perhaps you'd like to solve this problem on the board? Since you've apparently become such a mathematics enthusiast. Preston stood, his hand shaking slightly. The problem was complex, involving multiple derivatives. 2 months ago, he wouldn't have known where to start. But as he looked at it, he heard Elijah's voice in his head. Break it down. What's it really asking? He worked through it slowly, methodically. Not perfectly. He made 2 small errors, but his methodology was sound. When he finished, the class was silent. Interesting approach, Hargrove said coldly. Not the standard method. It works, doesn't it? It's time. Preston's transformation extended beyond academics. He started noticing things, really noticing. He saw how the shy freshman, David Park, always ate lunch alone. He observed how the debate team captain struggled with her stutter when nervous. He noticed how the afternoon light hit the library windows at exactly 3:47, creating a perfect study spot that everyone else missed. He even apologized to Jennifer Morrison, a scholarship student he'd mocked months earlier for her second-hand textbooks. "What's your angle?" she asked suspiciously. "No angle. I was an ass, I'm sorry." She studied him like he was a science experiment. "You're different lately." "I'm trying to be." "Why?" Preston thought about it. "'Cause someone showed me that being better is possible," his father called that evening. Preston could hear office sounds in the background. Charles Callahan never stopped working. "Principal Williams tells me you're showing improvement," his father said without preamble. "I'm trying, Dad. Trying isn't succeeding. It's a start." Charles laughed, but it wasn't warm. "You sound like a motivational poster." "The real world doesn't care about trying, Preston. It cares about results." Maybe that's the problem with the real world. Excuse me. Nothing. "I heard you've been coming to school early. Studying, yes. Good. Keep it up. But remember, Preston, this isn't about becoming a better person, or whatever nonsense they're filling your head with. This is about securing your future, your inheritance, your position. What if I want to earn my position?" Another laugh. "Earn. Preston, your job isn't to earn. Your job is to inherit. It's manage what I've built. Don't confuse effort with purpose." After the call ended, Preston sat in his dorm room, staring at nothing. A knock interrupted his thoughts. It was David Park, the shy freshman. "Hey, I heard you're doing better in math now," David said nervously. "Could you maybe help me with something?" Preston almost said no. He barely understood the material himself. But then he thought about Elijah, always teaching, always patient. "Sure, come in." They worked for 2 hours. Preston found that explaining concepts to David actually helped him understand them better. When David finally got it, his face lit up. With the same joy Preston had felt fixing that projector. "Thanks, man, really." "No problem. Come by whenever." After David left, Preston walked to the one place he knew he'd find clarity. Elijah was in the basement, working on something at his desk. As Preston got closer, he realized it wasn't cleaning schedules, it was blueprints, complex technical drawings for some kind of device. "What is that?" Preston asked. Elijah quickly covered the papers. "Nothing important. It looks important. Looks can be deceiving. Can I see?" Elijah hesitated, then slowly uncovered the drawings. They were designs for what looked like an automated water purification system, elegant in its simplicity, but brilliant in its execution. "You designed this? Long time ago? Why didn't you ever build it?" "I did build it, just never got to claim." Elijah rolled up the blueprints. "Some things get taken from you, Preston. But knowledge? That's yours forever. They can steal your work, your credit, your reputation. They can't steal what's in here." He tapped his temple. "Who's they?" Elijah looked at him for a long moment. "People who understand that in this world, ownership matters more than creation. People like..." He stopped himself. "Like my father?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." They stood in silence, the weight of unspoken truths filling the space between them. Finally, Elijah spoke. "Your father's company bought a startup in 2008. Clean Tech Innovations. Small company, big ideas. The founder had developed several patents for water purification systems aimed at developing nations." Preston's stomach twisted. What happened to the founder, accused of stealing proprietary information? Couldn't afford the legal fight. Lost everything. Elijah's voice was carefully neutral, but Preston heard the pain underneath. "The patents got buried. Apparently, they weren't profitable enough. It was you. You were the founder. Elijah didn't confirm or deny it. Just started packing up his things. It's late. You should get back to your dorm. Elijah, some stories don't have happy endings, Preston. But that doesn't mean they're not worth telling. Paused at the door. Or worth learning from. As Preston walked back to his dorm, his mind raced. His father had destroyed Elijah's life, reduced a brilliant engineer to mopping floors. And now, Elijah was teaching him, helping him, showing him kindness he didn't deserve. The weight of that irony was almost unbearable. But it also lit a fire in Preston that had nothing to do with saving his inheritance and everything to do with justice. The morning after learning about Elijah's past, Preston couldn't focus on anything. His breakfast sat untouched in the dining hall while his mind churned through possibilities. If his father had really destroyed Elijah's company, there had to be evidence somewhere. Charles Callahan never did anything without documentation. It was both his strength and, Preston hoped, his weakness. Earth to Preston. Jennifer Morrison dropped into the seat across from him. You've been staring at that oatmeal for 20 minutes. Sorry, just thinking about your mysterious early morning study sessions. Preston looked up sharply. What? Everyone knows you've been getting here at dawn? Hargrove's been asking questions. She lowered her voice. He thinks you're getting answers from someone. That's ridiculous. Is it your grades jumped overnight? That doesn't happen without help. Preston wanted to defend himself, but Jennifer was right. He had been getting help, just not the kind Hargrove suspected. The janitor's been teaching you, hasn't he? Jennifer said quietly. Elijah Ford. How did you? I see things too, Preston. Scholarship kids learn to pay attention. To everything. We can't afford not to. She glanced around, making sure no one was listening. He helped me once. Freshman year. I was failing physics, ready to lose my scholarship. He found me crying in the library after hours and spent 3 hours explaining electromagnetic theory using nothing but cleaning supplies and paper clips. Why didn't you tell anyone? Same reason you haven't. People like us and now you. I guess we protect the people who actually help us. That afternoon, Preston made a decision. He waited until his roommate left for lacrosse practice, then opened his laptop. His father had given him access to Callahan Global's subsidiary database for a summer internship Preston had never actually done. The credentials still worked. He started with 2008, searching for Cleantech innovations. At first, nothing came up. But then he tried various spellings and found it under acquisitions, except it wasn't listed as an acquisition. It was listed under intellectual property recovery. The folder required additional authorization. At Preston tried his father's usual password patterns, nothing. Then, on a hunch, he tried his own birthday. The folder opened. What he found made him sick. Emails, dozens of them, between his father and the legal team. They detailed a systematic plan to accuse Cleantech's founder, ever named, always referred to as the target of corporate espionage. They'd planted evidence, manipulated timestamps, even paid off a supposed witness. One email from Charles was particularly damning. Make sure he can never work in tech again. I don't want him resurfacing at a competitor. Complete professional destruction is the goal. Preston's hands shook as he took photos of everything with his phone. This wasn't just business. This was deliberate, malicious destruction of a man's life. What are you doing? Preston spun around. David Park stood in the doorway, looking concerned. David, you scared me. Your door was open? I came to ask about the calculus homework, but... David's eyes went to the screen. Is that Callahan? Global system. Preston quickly closed the laptop. You can't tell anyone? I won't. But Preston, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost. Preston debated for a moment, then made another decision. Can you keep a secret? A big one? David nodded, closing the door behind him. Preston told him everything about Elijah. Stolen patents, his father's role. David listened without interrupting, his expression growing more shocked with each detail. We have to do something, David said when Preston finished. You helped me when you didn't have to. Now I'm helping you. David pulled out his own laptop. My older brother's a journalism major at Columbia. He's always talking about document verification and building cases. We need to organize this evidence properly. They worked through dinner, missing it entirely. David proved surprisingly adept at organizing information, creating a timeline that clearly showed the pattern of theft and destruction. But they needed more specifically. They needed Elijah's original patents to prove they predated Callahan Global's versions. Those have to be filed somewhere, David said. Patent office? Maybe? Or Elijah might have copies. Preston stood up. I need to talk to him. He found Elijah in the maintenance tunnels beneath the school, a maze of pipes and electrical systems that students weren't supposed to know about. Elijah was examining what looked like old architectural blueprints spread across a makeshift table. You shouldn't be down here, Elijah said without looking up. I know what my father did to you. Elijah's hand stilled. Do you now? Cleantech innovations, the water purification patents, the false accusations. Preston pulled out his phone. I have proof. Put that away. But we could what? Elijah finally looked at him, his eyes tired. One of the most powerful men in New York. With what lawyers? What money? What influence? With the truth? Elijah laughed bitterly. The truth. Preston, I had the truth 17 years ago. Look where it got me. That was then. Things are different now. Social media, viral justice. Is that what you think this is about? Justice? Elijah rolled up the blueprints. I made peace with what happened. I'm not looking for revenge. Then what are these? Preston gestured to the blueprints. Old dreams. Elijah picked up a cardboard tube from a dusty shelf and pulled out a rolled document. My original patent applications, never filed. Your father's team destroyed my reputation before I could submit them. Preston unrolled one carefully. The design was elegant. Brilliant hand definitely predated anything in Callahan Global's portfolio. This could prove everything. Proving and winning are different things. Elijah took the patent back. Your father has resources I don't. He could bury me in legal fees before we even got to court. Then we don't go to court. We go public. Preston, stop. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. Preston's voice cracked with emotion. You've taught me more in 2 months than anyone has in 17 years. You've shown me who I could be instead of who I was supposed to be, and my family destroyed your life. I can't just ignore that. Elijah studied him for a long moment. Your fire burns too fast, kid. Let it mature before you torch bridges. Some bridges need burning, not when you're still standing on them. Before Preston could respond, footsteps echoed in the tunnel. What? Both froze. The footsteps grew closer, and then Hargrove appeared, his face triumphant. I knew it, he said. Callahan and the janitor? This explains everything. Mr. Hargrove, Elijah said calmly. These tunnels are restricted, save it. I've been watching you two for weeks. Early morning meetings. The sudden great improvement. You've been feeding him answers. It's not Preston started. I have photos, Hargrove interrupted. Time-stamped. You together, before every major test? He pulled out his phone, showing blurry but identifiable images. The disciplinary board will be very interested. I've been tutoring him, Elijah said. That's all. A janitor tutoring advanced mathematics, please? Hargrove's smirk widened. This is academic fraud. We'll both be expelled. Well, Preston will be expelled. Will be fired and probably arrested. Preston felt the world tilting. Expulsion meant losing everything, his inheritance, his future, any chance of helping Elijah. Unless, Hargrove continued, we can come to an arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Elijah asked quietly. There's a faculty position opening next year, advanced mathematics. I want your recommendation, Preston. Your father's on the board of trustees. You're blackmailing us? I'm being practical. Everyone wins. I get my position, you keep your inheritance, and Ford here keeps his job. Hargrove backed toward the exit. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, I go to Williams. After he left, Preston slumped against the wall. This is my fault. I should have been more careful. No, this is my fault, Elijah said. I knew better than to get involved. We can't let him win. Sometimes you have to lose a battle to win the war. Elijah gathered his blueprints. Go back. To your dorm. Stay away from me for a while, Elijah. Go, Preston. Please. The next day, Preston could barely concentrate. The school was buzzing about the upcoming spring showcase, where students presented year-end projects. Preston had never participated before, too much effort for too little reward. But now, staring at the sign-up sheet, an idea formed. He signed up for the robotics category. You don't take robotics, Jennifer pointed out. I'm going to build something independently in 3 weeks. That night, Preston snuck back to the maintenance tunnels. Elijah wasn't there, but his blueprints were. Preston carefully photographed each one and found what he was looking for: a design for an automated water testing device. Simple enough to build, but innovative enough to matter. He started that night, using the school's maker space after hours. David helped his steady hands better at delicate work than Preston's. Jennifer brought coffee and kept watch for security. Why are you both helping me? Preston asked during hour 3 of soldering. Because you're trying to do something right, Jennifer said. That's rare around here. Plus you helped me, David added. Friends support each other. Friends. Preston realized with a start, that's what they were. His first real friends, earned, not bought. They worked in shifts over the next week. Preston avoided Elijah, though it killed him to do so. He saw the older man in the hallways, maintaining his routine, but they didn't speak. Hargrove watched. Them both with satisfaction, believing his threat had worked. The project came together slowly. It wasn't perfect. Preston had to substitute several components. And the programming was held together by David's coding skills and prayer. But it worked. The device could test water quality in real time, sending data to a smartphone app that Jennifer had somehow cobbled together. We should test it, David suggested. They took it to the school pool. First, chlorine levels detected perfectly. Then to the pond behind campus, algae and bacteria levels accurately measured. Finally, to the drinking fountains, all clean, except for one in the east wing that showed concerning lead levels. Hey, this actually works, Jennifer said, amazed. Preston, this could be huge. It's not mine, Preston admitted. The design is Elijah's. I just built it, then credit him. That's the plan. 2 nights before the showcase, disaster struck. Preston arrived at the makerspace to find his project destroyed. Someone had taken a hammer to it, leaving nothing but scattered components and broken dreams. The security footage had been mysteriously corrupted, but Preston knew. The satisfaction on Hargrove's face the next morning confirmed it. Shame about your project, Hargrove said in the hallway. Guess you'll have to withdraw from the showcase. Preston wanted to punch him. Instead, he said, 48 hours aren't up yet. 24 hours left. Tick-tock. That evening, Preston found Elijah in his closet office. They hadn't spoken in a week. I destroyed it, Preston said without preamble. The project I was building. Your design. Elijah looked up from his notebook. I know. You know? Hargrove bragged about it in the faculty lounge. Thought no one was listening to the janitor. Elijah stood up. Why were you building my design? To show everyone what you created. To give you credit, I told you to leave it alone. Couldn't. Not after everything. Preston's voice broke. You're the only person who's ever seen me as more than my last name or my bank account. You taught me that failure could teach me. Well, I'm learning. I'm learning that sometimes doing right means losing everything.
Eyes.
Then he walked to a filing cabinet Preston had never seen him open. Inside were component circuit boards, sensors, processors. I've been building things for years, Elijah said, keeping them hidden. But maybe, maybe it's time to stop hiding. They worked through the night. Not just the two of them, Preston texted David and Jennifer, who arrived with coffee and determination. Even a few other students Preston had helped recently showed up, word spreading quietly through the dorms. By dawn, they had rebuilt the water tester, but better. Elijah's experience combined with the students' energy created something extraordinary. It wasn't just functional, it was elegant. It needs a name, David said. Project Phoenix, Preston said immediately. Built from the ashes of what was destroyed. The morning of the showcase, Preston stood in the auditorium, exhausted but determined. The space was already filling with parents, board members, and college recruiters. His father, would arrive soon, expecting to see his son fail one more time. "You ready for this?" Jennifer asked, adjusting the display board they'd created. "No," Preston admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." The showcase began with the usual presentations: volcano models, poetry readings, historical reenactments. Preston's project was scheduled last, which meant hours of growing anxiety. Then he saw him. Charles Callahan entered the auditorium like he owned it, which he partially did. His presence changed the energy of the room, people unconsciously moving out of his way. He took a seat in the front row, his expression already dismissive. Hargrove was there too, sitting with the faculty judges, kept checking his watch, waiting for Preston to either withdraw or fail spectacularly. Preston Callahan presenting. "Project Phoenix," the announcer called. Preston walked to the stage, his hands surprisingly steady. Behind him, David and Jennifer wheeled in the device. In the audience, Preston spotted Elijah in the back corner, almost invisible in his janitor's uniform. 6 months ago, Preston began, his voice carrying across the silent auditorium. "I was failing everything. Every test, every assignment, every expectation. I was the joke of Exeter Academy, the billionaire son who couldn't pass basic chemistry." Few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the audience. His father's expression hardened. "Then someone taught me something revolutionary," he said. "If you treat failure like a teacher, it'll give you more than success ever will." That person was a janitor. A man who cleans our halls at night, who everyone ignores, who most of you have never noticed. Preston clicked to his first slide a photo of Elijah he'd taken secretly, showing him reading advanced textbooks during his break. "This janitor taught me calculus using mop buckets. He explained physics through the rhythm of floor polishing. He showed me that intelligence doesn't wear a suit, and wisdom doesn't require a degree on the wall." The audience was fully engaged now, leaning forward. "But here's what I learned later: this janitor, Mr. Elijah Ford, is actually a brilliant engineer. Years ago, he designed revolutionary water purification systems that could have changed lives in developing nations. His designs were stolen, his reputation destroyed, his life's work buried by people who valued profit over progress." Preston clicked to the next slide. Elijah's original patent drawings. Project Phoenix is built from his designs. Not stolen, shared, taught, passed on from someone who refused to let failure destroy his ability to create. He demonstrated the device, testing water samples in real time. The lead contamination in the East Wing fountain caused gasps. The ability to detect microscopic impurities impressed the college recruiters. "But this isn't just about water testing," Preston continued. "It's about recognizing brilliance wherever it exists. It's about understanding that the people we ignore might be the ones with the most to teach us." He looked directly at his father. "I've learned that inheritance isn't about money or property or position. It's about knowledge passed from one generation to the next. Elijah Ford gave me an inheritance worth more than any trust fund he taught me how to learn, how to fail, how to build, and how to see people for who they really are." The presentation ended with a slide showing side-by-side photos Elijah's original designs and Preston's built version. Text reading: "Original designer, Dr. Elijah Ford, former MIT engineer. Builder, Preston Callahan, forever student." The auditorium erupted. Not just applause, but something more: recognition, revelation, respect. People were pulling out phones, recording, sharing. Within minutes, #Phoenix Prototype was trending locally. Preston saw various reactions simultaneously. Hargrove's face draining of color. His father's expression cycling through surprise, anger, and something unreadable. But most importantly, he saw Elijah in the back, tears streaming down his face. "That was incredible," Jennifer whispered as Preston left the stage. "It's not over," Preston replied. It's watching his father stand and leave without a word. An hour later, Preston's phone exploded with notifications. The video had gone viral. Billionaire son credits janitor for success headlines were everywhere. But more importantly, people were researching Elijah's story, finding traces of clean tech innovations, asking questions about what really happened. Preston found Elijah in his closet office, surrounded by students and even some faculty who'd sought him out after the presentation. "You shouldn't have done that," Elijah said, but he was smiling. "You were right about failure being a teacher," Preston replied. "But you were wrong about hiding. Some things need to be seen." That evening, Charles Callahan's lawyer arrived at the school with a cease and desist order. Preston was commanded to retract his statements and remove all videos. "You have no idea what you've started," the lawyer said. "Think I do," Preston replied, holding up his phone. 40,000 shares. 3 news outlets requesting interviews. And this, he showed an email. A former Clientic employee wanting to share his story about what really happened. The lawyer left, but Preston knew this was just the beginning. Hargrove tried one last power play, filing a formal complaint about academic fraud, but it backfired spectacularly. Students came forward about his behavior, the threats, the blackmail, the destruction of Preston's first project. Jennifer had recorded his hallway threat on her phone. Within a week, Hargrove was suspended pending investigation. Meanwhile, Elijah's story spread. Engineers and academics who remembered his early work started speaking up. A GoFundMe for his legal defense raised 6 figures in 3 days. Major tech companies reached out, interested in his designs. But the biggest shock came when Preston received a package. Inside was a hard drive and a note. "Your father wasn't the only one involved. The truth needs to come out. A friend." The drive contained emails, documents, financial records, evidence of a systematic pattern of intellectual property theft affecting dozens of inventors like Elijah. Charles Callahan wasn't just complicit. He was central to a network that had stolen innovations worth billions. Preston sat with the drive for hours, knowing that releasing this would destroy not just his father, but potentially himself. His inheritance, his name, his entire world would crumble. He thought about Elijah's words. Sometimes you have to lose a battle to win the war. But then he thought about what Elijah had also taught him. Failure isn't the end. It's the first lesson. Preston made his choice. He contacted the journalist Jennifer's brother had recommended. Within 72 hours, the story broke nationally. The Patent Pirates, how billionaires built empires on stolen dreams. Charles called within minutes of the story going live. "You've destroyed everything," his father said, his voice shaking with rage. "Your inheritance, our family's reputation, everything I built, everything you stole," Preston corrected. "You ungrateful, I'm grateful," Preston interrupted. "Grateful to someone who showed me that real success isn't about what you inherit, it's about what you earn. I'm earning my future now. You're nothing without my money, and I guess I'll find out who I really am." Preston hung up. His phone immediately rang again. Reporters, lawyers, family members. He silenced it all and walked to find Elijah. The older man was in the auditorium, sitting alone in the space where everything had changed. "You did it," Elijah said simply. "We did it. Your father will never forgive you. I'll never forgive him." Preston sat beside his mentor. "But you taught me something else. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about us. And I choose to forgive myself for taking so long to see the truth." Elijah pulled out his worn notebook and handed it to Preston. "Then you're ready for this." Preston opened it. Page after page of designs, innovations, ideas, a lifetime of creativity that had been suppressed but never destroyed. "These are yours now," Elijah said. "Build something better." The school board met in emergency session that night. The scandal was too big to ignore. By morning, they'd made their decision. Elijah would be offered a position developing a new program for underprivileged students interested in engineering. His janitor days were over if he wanted them to be. "I'll keep the keys," Elijah said, when offered the position. Best thinking happens when you're doing simple work with your hands. Preston's final exams were 2 weeks away. Despite everything's a showcase, the scandal, the complete upheaval of his life, he still had to pass. But now he had something he'd never had before. Genuine motivation. He studied with David and Jennifer, learned from Elijah in official tutoring sessions, and applied everything he'd learned about failure, persistence, and system thinking. When results came back, Preston had earned a B+ average. Not spectacular by Exeter standards, but for him, it was a miracle. He'd passed. He'd actually earned his success. The graduation ceremony was subdued. Charles Callahan didn't attend. But in the audience, Preston saw Elijah, David, Jennifer, dozens of others whose lives had been touched by recent events. Preston wasn't asked to give a speech. It's controversial now. But as he accepted his diploma, he caught Elijah's eye and nodded. They both knew this wasn't an ending. It was a blueprint for something better. The Callahan Global Boardroom had never seen chaos like this. 3 weeks after Preston's revelations went public, Charles Callahan faced 47 board members, major shareholders, and a battalion of lawyers. The mahogany table that had hosted billion-dollar deals now served as a tribunal. The evidence is overwhelming, board chairman Marcus Whitfield said, his voice carrying the weight of betrayal. 17 cases of confirmed patent theft, SEC violations, tax evasion through offshore shells. Charles, how do you explain this? Charles sat rigid in his Italian suit, his face a mask of controlled fury. These are allegations based on illegally obtained documents. My son, your son, exposed the truth, interrupted Sarah Goldman, representing the largest institutional investor. The FBI has already confirmed the authenticity of several documents. Our legal exposure alone could reach $2 billion, not to mention the ethical implications, added another member. We're being called corporate pirates in every major publication. Charles's lawyer, Harrison Blake, tried to interject. Mr. Callahan built this company from nothing. One scandal shouldn't... One scandal? Marcus laughed bitterly. Harrison, we have whistleblowers coming forward daily. 3 senior engineers resigned this morning. Microsoft and Amazon have suspended all partnerships pending investigation. Yes. Room erupted in arguments. Through it all, Charles remained silent. His jaw clenched so tight Preston could see the muscles twitching on the live stream he was watching from his dorm room. Motion to remove Charles Callahan as CEO, effective immediately, Sarah Goldman announced. Seconded came multiple voices. The vote was swift and merciless. 13-9 for removal, 8 abstaining, 0 in support. Charles stood slowly, his movements controlled. You'll regret this. All of you. The only regret, Marcus replied, is that we didn't see through you sooner. Preston closed his laptop, feeling hollow. He'd expected to feel victorious, but watching his father's empire crumble brought only sadness. His phone buzzed, another reporter, another request for comment. He'd stopped answering days ago. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Jennifer entered with coffee and David, who carried a tablet showing trending topics. You need to see this, David said, showing him the screen. Elijah's giving his first public interview. They watched together as Elijah, wearing a simple button-down instead of his janitor uniform, spoke to a major news anchor. I never wanted revenge, Elijah said on screen. For 17 years, I made peace with what happened. But when Preston showed courage I didn't have, when he risked everything for truth, I realized hiding wasn't peace, it was fear. What do you plan to do now? The anchor asked. What I always planned to do, innovate. But this time with protection and support. The interview continued with Elijah explaining his water purification technology, its potential impact on developing nations, and his plans to open source certain designs so they couldn't be stolen again. He's brilliant, Jennifer said quietly. The way he explains complex systems so simply. He always was, Preston replied. The world just wasn't listening. That afternoon, Preston received an unexpected visitor. Margaret Chen, one of the engineers, who'd resigned from Callahan Global, stood at his door with a box of documents. These belong to you, she said, handing him the box, or rather, to Dr. Ford. Inside were original clean tech documents that had been hidden in Callahan Global's archives research notes, its prototype specifications, even photos of Elijah from his MIT days. Why bring these to me? Preston asked. Because you did what none of us had the courage to do. We all knew, Preston. Maybe not the full extent, but we knew your father's success wasn't entirely legitimate. Margaret's voice carried years of suppressed guilt. We told ourselves it was just business, that everyone Did it? But watching you stand up to him, watching you choose integrity over inheritance, ... It shamed us all. Not too late to make it right. No, it's not. She pulled out a USB drive. This contains everything I know about the patent theft network. It goes beyond your father. There's a whole system. Judge Richmond, Senator Bailey, even some people at the patent office itself. Preston stared at the drive. This is dangerous. So is what you did, but you did it anyway. Margaret turned to leave, then paused. Your father wasn't always like this, you know. I worked with him 20 years ago when he was starting out. He was brilliant, driven, but also ethical. Something changed him, maybe success, maybe fear of losing it. Don't let the same thing happen to you. That evening, Preston met with the FBI agents investigating the case. They'd set up a temporary office at a hotel near campus. Agent Diana Torres led the investigation, her reputation for taking down corporate corruption preceding her. The information you've provided has opened multiple investigations, she told Preston. But I need to be clear. This will get uglier before it resolves. Your father has resources and connections. He won't go quietly. I know. We can offer you protection if needed. Preston almost laughed. Protection from my own father, from his associates. Some of these people have a lot to lose. Agent Torres pulled out a file. We've already documented 3 attempts to hack your devices. So private investigators following you, and someone tried to access your academic records yesterday. To find dirt on me? To discredit you? Yes. She leaned forward. Your doing is brave, but bravery doesn't stop bullets or lawsuits. Consider your next moves carefully. As if to underscore her point, Preston's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your girlfriend Jennifer has a nice apartment. A shame if her scholarship got investigated. Preston showed it to Agent Torres, his hands shaking with anger. More than fear? They're threatening my friends now, which means you're winning. Desperate people make desperate moves. She took a photo of the message. We'll increase surveillance on your associates. But Preston, you might want to consider stepping back, letting us handle it from here. No, Preston said firmly. Elijah didn't step back when teaching me meant risking his job. I won't step back now. The next morning brought unexpected news. Charles Callahan had been arrested at his Manhattan penthouse. Charges were extensive: fraud, conspiracy, tax evasion, and racketeering. The image of him in handcuffs broadcast. Globally, should have felt like justice. Instead, Preston felt only emptiness. His phone rang. His mother, who'd divorced Charles when Preston was 12 and moved to Europe. Preston, darling, I just saw the news. Are you all right? I'm fine, Mom. You're not fine. You've just destroyed your father. He destroyed himself. I just exposed it. Eleanor Callahan was quiet for a moment. I'm proud of you. I know that sounds terrible, but I am. Your father and I. The reason I left wasn't just personal. I discovered some of his business practices and couldn't be part of it, but I was a coward. I took my settlement and ran. You stayed and fought. I had help. At this. Janitor the news keeps mentioning Elijah, and yes, I'd like to meet him someday. Anyone who could teach you what I couldn't must be extraordinary. After the call, Preston walked across campus to the building where Elijah now had a proper office. The nameplate read Dr. Elijah Ford, Director of Innovation Outreach. Inside, Elijah was surrounded by students, explaining something on a whiteboard. The key isn't the technology, Elijah was saying. It's understanding the problem the technology solves. Too many inventors create solutions looking for problems. Real innovation starts with empathy. The students took notes eagerly. When the session ended, Preston entered. Dr. Ford, he said with a slight smile, has a nice ring to it. It's just a title. It doesn't change who I am. Elijah gestured to a chair. Why are you holding up? My father was arrested this morning, I saw. Do you feel? Preston considered lying, saying he was fine, but Elijah had taught him the value of honesty. Lost, guilty, relieved, angry. Everything at once. That's normal. You can love someone and hate what they've done. You can destroy someone's lies while still grieving the relationship. Elijah pulled out 2 cups and poured tea from a kettle. Your father was wrong about many things, but he was right about one: you were meant to inherit, just not money. You inherited his intelligence, but chose your own integrity. What if I become like him? You won't. How do you know? Because you're asking that question? Your father never did. Elijah handed him the tea. I have something to show you. He led Preston to a laboratory in the building's basement. Inside, several students were working on various projects. But the centerpiece was Cleara full-scale water purification system based on Elijah's designs. Blue Root Innovations is officially incorporated, Elijah announced. Initial funding came from the settlement with Callahan Global's insurance. But more importantly, we have our first contract providing systems to 3 villages in Ghana. That's incredible. I want you to be part of it. Preston stared at him, but not as an investor or heir, as an intern. Ground-level learning. Everything from basic assembly to system integration. Minimum wage, maximum effort. You want me to work for you? I want you to work with me. There's a difference. Elijah gestured to the lab. Your father tried to give you everything except what mattered: purpose. This is my offer. Earn your purpose. Preston didn't hesitate. Yes, good. You start Monday. Bring work clothes. 6 months later, Preston stood knee-deep in mud in a village outside Accra, Ghana. His designer clothes were long gone, replaced by practical work gear covered in red earth and sweat. The water purification system they'd been installing for 3 days was almost complete. Connect that coupling tighter, Elijah called out. Water pressure here is inconsistent. Preston adjusted the connection, his hands now calloused and confident. The Preston of a year ago wouldn't recognize himself, sunburned, exhausted, and happier than he'd ever been. Is it ready? Asked Kofi, the village chief's son, who'd been translating for them. Almost, Preston replied, then repeated it in the basic Chui he'd been learning. The attempt earned him smiles from the gathered villagers. The system came online. With a hum, water flowed through the filtration chambers, emerging clean and safe. The villagers cheered, children dancing in the spray. An elderly woman grabbed Preston's hands, tears in her eyes, speaking rapidly in Twi. She says you've given her grandchildren life, Kofi translated. Preston felt his own eyes burning. Tell her it wasn't me. It was Dr. Ford's design. But you built it, Elijah said quietly beside him. The design means nothing without someone willing to get dirty making it real. That evening, in their small hotel, Preston video called Jennifer and David. They'd started a nonprofit back home, connecting failed students with unconventional mentors, janitors, mechanics, anyone with practical wisdom overlooked by traditional education. We've got 47 pairs so far, Jennifer reported. The dropout rate for participating students is down 60%. Get this, David added. 3 of our janitor mentors have been offered adjunct teaching positions. Turns out they had hidden degrees or expertise nobody knew about. Wisdom wears boots movement is spreading, Jennifer continued. Schools in 12 states have reached out. Preston smiled. The name had been Elijah's idea, but the execution was all theirs. How's your dad? David asked carefully. Preston's smile faded. Trial starts next month. His lawyers are trying for a plea deal, but the FBI wants maximum sentences. 20 years, potentially. Will you testify, if they need me to? The call ended with promises to meet when Preston returned. Sat on the hotel's balcony, watching the sun set over the African landscape. His phone buzzed a number he didn't recognize. Preston? This is your father. Preston's blood chilled. How are you calling me? I have 5 minutes. Lawyer's phone. I need to tell you something. I don't want to hear your half-sister. Preston froze. What? Her name is Lily. She's 10. Lives with her mother in Boston. I've been supporting them secretly. Charles's voice cracked. When I go to prison, that support stops. She doesn't deserve to suffer for my sins. Telling me this? Because despite everything, you're still my son, and you're the only one I trust to do the right thing. The line went quiet for a moment. I'm proud of you, Preston. I know that means nothing now, but I am. You became the man. I was too afraid to be. The line went dead. Preston stared at the phone, processing. Sister. Another life affected by his father's choices. He knocked on Elijah's door and explained the situation. What do you want to do? Elijah asked. I want to meet her. Make sure she's okay. Then we go to Boston when we get back. Let you handle this alone? Elijah smiled. Family is complicated, but abandoning family because it's complicated? That's your father's way, not yours. 2 weeks later, Preston stood outside a modest apartment building in Boston. Elijah waited in the car, giving him space. Preston knocked, his heart racing. A woman answered, mid-30s, tired eyes, defensive posture. You must be Preston. Mrs. Davidson. Just Rebecca. Come in. She led him to a small but clean living room. Lily's at school. I wanted to talk first. My father told me your father told you what he wanted you to know. Rebecca's voice was bitter. The truth is messier. We had an affair while he was married to your mother. When I got pregnant, he paid me to disappear. Set us up here sent. Money monthly, but Lily's never met him. How does she know about him? She knows her father is rich and complicated. She doesn't know he's a criminal. Rebecca studied him. Why are you here? Because she's my sister. She shouldn't pay for his mistakes. You're already paying for them. The news says you gave up your inheritance. I gave up his money. My family. Preston pulled out an envelope. This is information about a trust I'm setting up for Lily. Education, living expenses, whatever she needs. It's from money I earned, not his. Rebecca's eyes widened. You don't even know us.
No.
She's 10 and innocent. That's enough. The door opened, and a girl entered small for her age, with Preston's eyes and their father's stubborn chin. She stopped when she saw him. Mom, who's this? Lily, this is Preston. Your brother? The girl's eyes widened. I have a brother. You do, Preston said, kneeling to her height. And I'm sorry it took so long to meet you. Lily studied him with an intensity that reminded him of Elijah's first assessment. Mom says our dad is complicated. He is. Are you complicated? Smiled. I'm trying to be simple. Want to help me? She nodded, and somehow, that small gesture began healing something Preston didn't know was broken. Over the following months, Preston split his time between Blue Root Innovations, visiting Lily, and preparing for his father's trial. The media attention had died down, but the work continued. Elijah's company grew, hiring former Callahan global engineers who'd left in protest. They developed new products, affordable solar batteries, portable medical diagnostic tools, educational robotics kits for underfunded schools. Preston learned every aspect of the business, from supply chain management to customer service. He made mistakes, costly ones sometimes, but Elijah never berated him. Instead, each failure became a lesson. You're getting good at this, Margaret Chen said one day. She'd joined Blue Root as head of engineering. Have you thought about college? I'm in college, Preston replied. The University of Elijah, I'm serious. MIT has a spot for you if you want it. I pulled some strings. Preston was tempted. MIT had been his dream before everything fell apart. But he looked around the lab, at the work being done, the lives being changed. Maybe someday. Right now, I'm where I need to be. The trial began in September. Preston testified for 3 hours, detailing what he'd discovered, why he'd acted. His father sat 20 feet away, looking older, smaller somehow. When Preston finished, Charles mouthed 2 words, thank you. The verdict was guilty on all counts. 15 years minimum, possibility of 20. As they led Charles away, he stopped and looked back at Preston one last time. Preston nodded, not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. But Preston pushed through to where Elijah waited. How do you feel? Elijah asked. Like I'm finally free to build something? Then let's build. They returned to the lab, where a surprise waited. The school had commissioned a bronze plaque for the building entrance. The Ford Callahan Innovation Center. They wanted to put my name first, Elijah said. I insisted on alphabetical. Preston laughed, then noticed something else. A group of students waited inside, all wearing matching t-shirts. Failure is my teacher. What's this? Preston asked. Jennifer stepped forward. The first graduating class of the mentor program. They wanted to meet the person who started it all? That was Elijah. No, Elijah interrupted. I was the teacher. You were the student who chose to learn, and now you're teaching others. That's how real education works, it spreads. Girl, maybe 15, approached nervously. Mr. Callahan? I'm failing everything, just like you were. My parents say I'm hopeless, but seeing what you became, ... Maybe I'm not. Preston saw himself in her eyes, lost, scared, but with a spark of hope. He pulled out a notebook, one of many he'd started carrying like Elijah. First lesson, he said, writing as he spoke. Failure isn't your enemy, it's your most honest teacher. Now, let's talk about what you're really struggling with, as he worked with the girl. Elijah watched from the doorway, a proud smile on his face. The janitor who'd become a teacher, watching his student become a teacher too. The cycle continued. Wisdom passed from one generation to the next, proof that inheritance isn't about money or position. It's about knowledge, compassion, and the courage to change. That night, Preston visited his old dorm room one last time before graduation. On his desk was Elijah's original notebook, now worn from constant use. The cover still bore that single line. Now it's your turn. Preston added his own line below it, and I'm ready. 5 years had passed since Preston testified against his father. The Ford Callahan Innovation Center had become a beacon for unconventional education, and Preston stood before a packed auditorium, adjusting the microphone for his keynote speech at the National Education Reform Summit. Traditional metrics told me I was a failure, Preston began, his voice steady and confident. Standardized tests, GPAs, academic rankings, every measurement said I would amount to nothing. But one man saw past those numbers. He saw potential. Where everyone else saw problems, in the audience, Elijah sat in the third row, his hair now completely gray, but his eyes still sharp. Beside him sat Lily, now 15, and thriving at a STEM academy Preston helped fund. Today, I want to talk about the 10,000 invisible geniuses in America, Preston continued. The janitors with engineering degrees. The security guards who solve complex problems. The cafeteria workers who understand chemistry better than some professors. They're invisible not because they lack brilliance, but because we've been trained not to see them. He clicked to his first slide statistics from the mentorship program that had grown into a national movement. 5 years ago, we paired 47 failing students with blue-collar mentors. Today, the Wisdom Wears Boots Foundation operates in all 50 states with 12,000 active partnerships. Our success rate? 83% of participating students improve their grades. But more importantly, 91% report finding purpose. The audience applauded. Preston waited for quiet. But I'm not here to celebrate statistics. I'm here because one of our mentors needs your help. The screen showed a photo of Marcus Thompson, a school custodian from Detroit Hood. Been mentoring struggling students in mathematics. Marcus has stage 4 cancer. Treatment costs have bankrupted his family. Spent 40 years serving education while being ignored by it. Today, we launched the Invisible Genius Fund healthcare support for the mentors, who give everything and ask for nothing. Preston pulled out a check. Blute Innovations is committing $1 million. Who's with us? Hands raised throughout the auditorium. Within 10 minutes, pledges exceeded $5 million. After the speech, Preston found Elijah. Backstage? That was well done, Elijah said simply. I learned from the best. No, you've learned from failure. I just pointed it out. Elijah's expression grew serious. We need to talk, privately. They walked to a quiet corner. Elijah pulled out a medical report. Parkinson's, he said quietly. Early stages, but progressive. Preston felt the world tilt. How long have you known? 6 months. The tremors are still manageable, but they'll get worse. There are treatments, which I'm pursuing. But Preston, we need to discuss succession. At Blue Root, the company needs stable leadership. You're not dying, Elijah. No, but I'm declining. And I'd rather plan while my mind is clear than scramble when it's not. He handed Preston a folder. The board wants you as coup. You've earned it. Preston stared at the offer. 5 years ago, he would have grabbed it without thought. Now, he hesitated. I need to think about it.
Good.
Never make important decisions. Quickly, Elijah smiled. You really have learned. That evening, Preston visited Lily in Boston. She was working on a robotics project. Her concentration absolute. Need help? He offered. I'm good. Actually better than good. Watch this. She activated the robot, which navigated an obstacle course flawlessly.
Entering it.
In the state championship. That's incredible. You know what's more incredible? My teacher says I could get into MIT. She looked at him hopefully. Do you come to my interviews? Of course. Dad won't be there. It wasn't a question. Charles still had 10 years left. On his sentence? No. But I will be. Always. She hugged him suddenly, fiercely. You're the only real family I have, besides Mom. That's not true. You have Elijah, Jennifer. David family isn't just blood, Lily. It's who shows up. His phone rang. Jennifer's name appeared. Preston, you need to see the news. Now, he turned on the television. The headline made his blood freeze. Charles Callahan. Found dead in prison. Apparent suicide. Preston stared at the screen, unable to process. The Titan, who'd seemed invincible, was gone. A guard had found him in his cell that morning. He'd left a note, the reporter said, addressed to his son, Preston? Lily's voice seemed distant. Are you okay? I don't know. The funeral was small. Most of Charles's former associates didn't attend. Association with him was still toxic. Preston stood at the grave with Eleanor, his mother, who'd flown in from Paris. Lily and Rebecca came. Though they stood apart, Elijah was there, steady as always. The lawyer handed Preston the note after the service. Charles's handwriting, once bold and commanding, looked shaky. Preston, I spent 5 years in a cell thinking about power. I pursued it relentlessly, believing it would make me untouchable. But you understood what I never did. Real power isn't in taking, but in teaching. You gave away everything I built, yet you're richer than I ever was, not asking for forgiveness. Some things are unforgivable. But know that in my final years, watching what you became was my only source of pride. Your father, for whatever that's worth. Preston folded the note carefully. Elijah stood beside him. How do you mourn someone who hurt so many people? Preston asked. The same way you mourn anyone honestly. He was your father. That means something, even if he failed at it. I wanted him to see me succeed without his help. He did. He saw you become everything he couldn't be. A month later, Preston accepted the coup position at Blue Root, but with conditions. He would split time between the company and a new initiative building. Innovation centers in prisons, teaching inmates practical skills and problem solving. Redemption shouldn't be exclusive to the wealthy, he explained to the board. My father died thinking he was irredeemable. Maybe he was, but others aren't. The first prison workshop launched at Rikers Island. Preston taught basic electronics. While former inmates who'd succeeded after release shared their stories, one older inmate approached after class. You're Callahan's kid, he said. Wasn't a question? Yes. Your old man was in my block for a while, kept to himself mostly, but he talked about you sometimes, said you were the only thing he ever built that mattered. Preston didn't know how to respond to that. Meanwhile, Elijah's condition progressed. Faster than expected. The tremors affected his hands enough that detailed work became impossible. But his mind remained sharp, and he adapted. Using voice-controlled systems and delegating physical tasks while focusing on design and strategy. I'm not disappearing, he told Preston during one of his bad days. I'm just changing how I appear. Together. They designed adaptive tools for workers with disabilities, voice-controlled manufacturing systems, camera compensating tools, augmented reality guides for those with cognitive challenges. We're all disabled eventually, Elijah said. Might as well plan for it. The innovation caught the attention of major tech companies. Google offered to buy the adaptive technology division for $200 million. Preston brought the offer to Elijah. What do you think? Preston asked. I think money isn't the metric anymore. Will they develop it properly? Make it accessible? They promise to. Promises from powerful people. Elijah smiled wryly. We both know what those are. Worth. Instead, they open-sourced the technology, making it freely available to anyone who wanted to develop it further. The financial hit was significant, but the impact was immediate. Small companies worldwide began creating localized versions for their communities. You just gave away a fortune, Margaret Chen said, though she was smiling. I learned from my father's mistakes, Preston replied. And from Elijah's wisdom, some things shouldn't be owned. Jennifer's nonprofit had evolved into a full educational reform movement. She'd testified before Congress about the value of unconventional education, using Preston and Elijah's story as her centerpiece. We have a broken system that measures intelligence through standardized tests while ignoring practical wisdom, she testified. How many Elijahs are out there, mopping floors with genius-level insights? How many Prestons are failing, not because they can't learn, but because we don't know how to teach them? The testimony went viral. #WisdomWears boots trended globally. Schools began hiring practical consultants, blue-collar workers who could provide real-world context to academic concepts. David, meanwhile, had become a successful software developer, creating apps that connected students with mentors based on learning styles rather than subject matter. Remember when you could barely pass coding? Preston reminded him during a reunion. Remember when you couldn't pass anything? David shot back, laughing. And now look at us. 3 failures who changed education. Not bad. It's 10 years after that. First detention night. Preston stood in the MIT auditorium delivering the commencement address. Behind him sat the faculty, including MIT's newest endowed chairholder, Dr. Elijah Ford, professor of applied innovation, his position specially designed to accommodate his physical limitations while maximizing his intellectual contributions. I failed every test in high school, Preston began, getting the graduates' attention. My father tried to buy my success. My teachers gave up on me. I gave up on myself. Then a janitor taught me the secret that changed everything. He paused, scanning the young faces before him. Failure, if studied, teaches you the blueprint for success, but only if you're humble enough to learn and brave enough to try again. In the audience, Lily sat in her cap and gown, graduating with honors in mechanical engineering. She'd not only gotten into MIT, but had thrived. Her senior project, an affordable water desalination system, winning 3 national awards. Today, you're graduating from one of the world's best institutions. But I'm here to tell you that education doesn't stop at graduation. It doesn't even start here. It starts the moment you realize everyone has something to teach you. After the ceremony, Preston found Elijah in his specialized wheelchair, surrounded by students seeking one last piece of advice. Professor Ford, Preston said formally, then grinned. Still sounds strange? Not as strange as Dr. Callahan will? Sound when you defend your dissertation next month. Preston had finally pursued formal education, earning degrees while working. His doctoral thesis, Practical Intelligence, Redefining Merit in American Education. Think I'll pass? Preston asked. Wrong question. Think you'll learn? I always do when you're teaching. A young woman approached nervously. Mr. Callahan. I'm Maria Santos. I'm a janitor here at MIT, but I've been studying your work on unconventional education. I have ideas. ... double quotes. Preston and Elijah exchanged glances, both smiling. Tell us about your ideas, Preston said, pulling up chairs. We have time. Maria talked for an hour about using maintenance routines to teach supply chain management, about the chemistry involved in choosing cleaning products, about the physics of efficient building maintenance. Her passion reminded Preston of himself. A decade agora, unrefined but genuine. I want to start a program, Maria concluded, teaching students through maintenance work. Making the invisible visible. Then do it, Elijah said simply. But I'm just a janitor. So was I, Elijah replied. And I taught him. He pointed to Preston, who helped teach her, indicating Lily, who will teach others. That's how knowledge spreads not down from ivory towers, but outward from wherever wisdom exists. Maria left with promises to submit a formal proposal. Preston watched her go, seeing the same spark he'd once discovered in himself. That evening, Preston published his book, Blueprints in a Mop Bucket, the Elijah Ford story. It became an instant bestseller, but more importantly, it became required reading in education programs nationwide. The book tour took him to 50 cities. Detroit, he met Marcus Thompson, the janitor whose medical bills had sparked the invisible Genius Fund. Marcus was in remission, back to mentoring students. "You saved my life," Marcus said. "You saved dozens of students' futures. Seems like a fair trade." In a small town in Alabama, a teenager approached after Preston's talk. "I'm failing. Everything," the boy said. "My dad says I'm stupid, but I can fix any engine, build anything with my hands. That doesn't count for anything in school." Preston handed him a card. "Call this number. Ask for the regional mentor coordinator. Tell them I sent you. Will that work?" It worked for me. Foundation had grown beyond anyone's imagination. Fortune 500 companies funded it. Universities partnered with it. But at its core, it remained simple, connecting those who needed to learn with those who knew how to teach, regardless of credentials. Elijah's health continued to decline, but his influence grew. The Ford Fellowship at MIT had produced 12 patents in 5 years, all open-sourced. The Ford Callahan Innovation Centers operated in 30 cities. The Ford method of practical education was being studied and implemented globally. One quiet evening, Preston visited Elijah at his assisted living facility, a high-tech one that Elijah had helped design for people with degenerative conditions. "I'm writing another book," Elijah said, his voice slightly slurred but his eyes bright. "About you? Me? I'm not that interesting. You're the most interesting failure I ever met. A boy who had everything and threw it away to gain something better. What's that? Purpose." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset through smart windows that automatically adjusted for Elijah's light sensitivity. "I have something for you," Elijah said, gesturing to a box. Inside was his original janitor's keyring from Exeter Academy. "These opened every door in that school," Elijah said. "But the real doors they opened were in Mindseers, then others. Keep them. Remember that access isn't about privilege. It's about responsibility." Preston took the keys, feeling their weight both physical and symbolic. 3 months later, Elijah passed peacefully in his sleep. His funeral filled MIT's largest auditorium, with overflow crowds watching on screens outside. Janitors stood next to CEOs, students sat beside Nobel laureates. The president sent condolences. But the most moving tribute came from Lily. "Dr. Ford never taught me directly," she said at the podium. "But he taught my brother, who taught me. That's his true legacy. Not the innovations or the programs, but the chain of learning he started. Each person he influenced others. It's exponential, infinite." Preston spoke last, holding those janitor keys. Elijah Ford was called. A janitor for 17 years, but he was never just a janitor. He was a teacher waiting for students ready to learn. He was innovation disguised as maintenance. He was wisdom wearing work boots. Preston's voice broke slightly. "He was my father in every way that mattered." The foundation created the Elijah Ford Memorial Statue at MIT or any university, but at Exeter Academy, where it all began. The bronze figure showed Elijah holding a mop in one hand and blueprints in the other. The inscription read, "Greatness often wears overalls." At the dedication, hundreds gathered. Preston spoke briefly. "Elijah taught me that failure isn't the end. It's the first lesson. Today I can say I've failed countless times since meeting him. Failed projects, failed investments, failed attempts to live up to his example. But each failure taught me something. And that's the secret, not avoiding failure, but learning from it." Preston now ran Blue Root Innovations, which had become a certified B Corporation, balancing profit with purpose. They'd developed 93 patents, all open-sourced. Their water purification systems operated in 40 countries, adaptive. Technologies helped millions with disabilities. But Preston's proudest achievement was smaller, more personal. In the mail, he received a letter from that boy in Alabama, Mr. Callahan, I called the number. It paired me with a mechanic named Jim. He's teaching me that engines are just physics you can touch. I passed my first math test last week. My dad doesn't call me stupid anymore. Thank you for seeing something in me. Robert Preston kept the letter in his desk, next to Elijah's notebook and his father's final note reminders of where he'd been and where he was going. On the anniversary of Elijah's death, Preston stood at the statue with a small group: Jennifer, David, Lily, Margaret, and others whose lives had been changed. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to, as Preston walked away. A young janitor was cleaning nearby, earbuds in, seemingly invisible to the students passing by. Preston stopped. "Excuse me," he said. The janitor pulled out an earbud. "Yes, I'm Preston Callahan. What's your name?" "James. James Washington." "What are you listening to, James?" "Oh, actually a physics podcast. I'm trying to understand quantum mechanics." Preston smiled. "Want to learn something about quantum mechanics you won't find in any podcast?" James nodded, curious. "It's like mopping a floor. You can't predict exactly where each particle of dust will go, but you can understand the probability of where it'll end up. The uncertainty isn't a fluke, it's fundamental to how things work." James stared at him. That ... actually makes sense. Okay, janitor taught me that. Changed my life." Preston handed him a business card. "If you want to learn more, really learn, not just listen, call me." As Preston walked away, he could feel Elijah's approval somehow. The chain continued. One connection at a time, one lesson at a time. One failure transformed into wisdom at a time. Years later, when Preston was old and gray himself, a young reporter asked him about his legacy. "Legacy?" Preston laughed. "I don't have one. I'm just a link in a chain that started with a janitor and continues with every person who realizes that wisdom doesn't wear a tuxedo, wears whatever shows up to work." "But you changed education in America." "Education. I just made sure people heard about it." "What would you want people to remember?" Preston thought about it, fingering the old janitor keys he still carried. "That the world looks down on the ones who sweep," he said finally, "until they're the ones who rebuild it." The reporter left, but Preston remained, standing by the window of his office at Blue Route, watching the city below. Somewhere out there, a janitor was mopping a floor, carrying untold wisdom. Somewhere, a student was failing a test that would teach them to succeed. Somewhere, the chain continued. Elijah's voice echoed in his memory. The secret lives on, and it did. What wisdom are you overlooking simply because of who's delivering it? And who might you become if you finally stop to listen? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives that challenge everything you think you know about success, failure, and the hidden brilliance that surrounds us every day.